Europe's most dangerous enemy right now isn't an army, but the clock. And it's ticking down to a moment of truth that could shatter the continent. The threat isn't a lack of wealth, it's a catastrophic time inefficiency. Forget the grand declarations of unity. This is a brutal undeclared race between Russia's wartime industry, which is churning out tanks from its vast reserves, and Europe's peacetime bureaucracy, which is still scheduling meetings. With American commitment wavering, Europe is being forced to pioneer a continent-wide rearmament at emergency speed. This has created the most urgent question of our time, with intelligence suggesting a window of maximum danger is just 3 to 5 years away. Is it already too late? We're watching a slow-motion geopolitical car crash, where the impact is visible to all, but the brakes aren't working fast enough. Is this the pressure that finally fuses Europe into a military power, or a deadline so impossible it guarantees a strategic failure? The American Keystone, more than just money. For years, the big fight inside NATO has been about money, specifically the rule that says every country should spend 2% of its GDP on defense. But focusing on that 2% is like arguing about the cost of gasoline while ignoring the fact that someone is about to steal the car's engine. The truth is, the US role in NATO is about something much more important than cash. America's 2024 defense budget is a mind-blowing $967.7 billion. That's nearly double the combined spending of all its European allies and Canada, which sits around $506.7 billion. But the real problem isn't the money. It's the unique skills and equipment that only America has. These are called enablers, and Europe's entire military strategy is built assuming they'll always be there. Taking them away wouldn't just be like losing a player, it would be like canceling the entire game. In an instant, Europe wouldn't just lose an ally, it would lose the very things that make a modern military function. It would lose its eyes and ears as American spy satellites and drones go dark. It would lose its transport as the US airlift and refueling fleets vanish, leaving armies stranded. It would lose its brain as the command networks that unify dozens of nations collapse into chaos. It's a military machine being stripped of its parts, an economy forced into a death spiral, and a continent left terrified and alone. This isn't just losing a shield, it's a body losing its entire nervous system. So if America steps back, what is Europe actually left with? When you add it all up, it looks pretty impressive. European NATO nations collectively spend more on defense than Russia and have about 1.9 million active soldiers. But this is a dangerous illusion. Decades of peace, budget cuts, and relying on America have created a force that is a mile wide and an inch deep. On the ground, the picture is deeply worrying. Countries on the front line, like Poland, are building up fast and will soon have over 660 modern tanks. But the continent's traditional military heavyweights, the UK, France, Germany, and Italy, have fewer than 900 tanks combined. Even worse, 12 EU countries don't have any tanks at all. For years, many European armies got rid of their heavy armor and artillery. They built smaller, professional forces designed to fight counterinsurgency wars in places like Afghanistan, always under the American security blanket. The problem? Russia isn't fighting that kind of war. It's fighting a brutal, grinding war of mass and attrition, with thousands of tanks and endless artillery barrages. Europe is simply not built for that kind of fight. To fill the gap left by American heavy brigades, one analysis estimates Europe would urgently need to buy at least 1,400 new tanks, 2,000 armored vehicles, and 700 modern artillery systems. Europe's air forces are its strongest card. They have some of the best jets in the world, like the French Rafale, the Eurofighter Typhoon, and a growing fleet of stealthy American F-35s. Their pilots are fantastically trained. On paper, they should dominate the skies. But this strength is incredibly brittle. First, do they have enough bombs and missiles? The war in Ukraine has shown that modern conflict eats up munitions at a terrifying rate. Experts worry that Europe has the fancy jets to win the first few days of an air war, but lacks the stockpiles and industrial power to keep fighting for weeks or months. Second, even with great planes, experts believe that without the US, Europe would struggle to win air superiority against Russian forces. Why? Because Russia has a thick, deadly network of ground-based air defenses, and Europe would be missing the sheer number of US jets. Most importantly, Europe is missing the support planes. The effectiveness of a fighter jet depends on aerial tankers to refuel it and I-star planes to find its targets. The US provides the vast majority of these. Without them, Europe's powerful air fleet would be fighting with one hand tied behind its back. This is Europe's Achilles heel, a trifecta of strategic failure. It's a military that can't see the battlefield without American eyes, a continent that can't defend its own cities from a storm of missiles, and a power that can't punch back hard enough to make an enemy bleed. It's the ultimate nightmare scenario, a blind, defenseless giant facing a wounded bear that's adapting and learning your every move. To know if Europe can survive, you have to understand the enemy it faces. The Russian military that blundered its way through the first few weeks of the Ukraine war in 2022 is not the same army it is today. It has been humiliated and has suffered shocking losses, but it has also learned, adapted, and reverted to a strategy of pure, brutal attrition. After its initial plan for a lightning victory failed, Russia fell back on what it knows best, using overwhelming artillery fire and human wave attacks to slowly grind down its enemy. It's a horrifyingly bloody and inefficient strategy, but it plays to Russia's strengths: a huge population and a high tolerance for casualties. The Russian army in Ukraine has actually grown from about 360,000 troops in early 2023 to 470,000 today. But this pressure comes at a cost that is almost impossible to imagine. Recent analysis highlights that Russia has been losing equipment at a rate as high as 5-to-1 compared to Ukraine, and is projected to suffer 1 million total casualties by the summer of 2025. This shows a complete disregard for the lives of its own soldiers. To feed this meat grinder, Russia has put its economy on a war footing. It's turning out around 1,500 tanks and 3,000 armored vehicles a year. But here's the secret vulnerability. An estimated 80% of this is not new equipment. It's a Frankenstein arsenal of old Soviet-era tanks and vehicles being pulled out of storage, patched up, and sent to the front. This gives Europe a crucial window of time. According to military analysts, Russia can keep this up through 2024. But by 2025, it will start to run into problems as it runs out of easy-to-refurbish gear. By 2026, most of its usable Soviet stockpile could be gone. This sets up a terrifying race. Can Europe rearm itself before Russia reconstitutes its army for a new fight? The window of maximum danger is the next 3 to 5 years. Looming over all of this is Russia's nuclear arsenal, the biggest in the world with around 5,580 warheads. Russia constantly uses it as a tool of blackmail, threatening to use nuclear weapons to stop anyone from interfering in its wars. At the same time, it's waging a shadow war of sabotage, arson, and cyber attacks across Europe, trying to cause chaos and weaken the West's will to fight back. Losing a war in 60 hours. What would a war between a Europe-alone NATO and Russia actually look like? Military war games paint a grim and urgent picture. The most likely and dangerous flashpoint is an invasion of the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. A famous series of war games came to a shocking conclusion. NATO, as it was postured, could not stop Russia from overrunning the Baltics. In the simulation, the longest it took for Russian tanks to reach the capital cities of Tallinn and Riga was just 60 hours. This would be a fait accompli, a done deal. Russia would have seized the territory of NATO allies, proving the alliance's Article 5 promise to be an empty gesture. European leaders would be left with two disastrous choices: either launch a bloody, full-scale war to free the Baltics from a nuclear-armed Russia, or accept a historic defeat that would shatter NATO forever. This nightmare happens because of geography and time. Russia can gather its forces on the Baltic border with little warning. The heavy European brigades needed to stop them from places like France and Germany would have to travel across the continent. Without US strategic airlift to fly troops in and establish control of the air, they would simply be too slow. The war could be strategically lost before the bulk of Europe's army even arrives. The conflict would be a brutal test. It would start with a furious battle for the skies, where Europe's advanced jets would be pitted against Russia's dense air defenses in a fight that would drain Europe's limited missile stockpiles. On the ground, it would become a horrific war of attrition, pushing European logistics, ammunition supplies, and medical systems to the breaking point. In the end, the winner wouldn't be decided by fancy jets, but by the grim reality of industrial production. It would be a race to see whose factories could replace tanks, shells, and drones faster. Right now, a European NATO without the United States could not stop a full-scale Russian attack without suffering a catastrophic defeat. The removal of the American Keystone would expose a fragile, fragmented, and unprepared continent. But this isn't a prophecy, it's a warning. Europe has immense economic and technological power. Survival is not impossible, but it requires European leaders to wake up and make radical, unified, and immediate choices. They can no longer afford endless debates and slow, bureaucratic programs. They need a revolution in military readiness, industrial strategy, and political will. This means launching an emergency plan to immediately buy the three things they lack most: layered missile defense, long-range missiles to strike back, and their own spy satellites to see the battlefield. It means putting heavily armed brigades on the front lines in the Baltics permanently, creating a wall of steel, not just a political tripwire. It means ending the foolishness of having a dozen different types of tanks and fighter jets. Europe must consolidate its demand, build weapons together to get economies of scale, and create a true arsenal of democracy. This will require a massive debt-financed European security fund to the tune of hundreds of billions of euros to jumpstart production. And most of all, it requires political will. It means creating a European Security Council with real power to make vast decisions in a crisis, not getting bogged down in unanimous votes while the enemy advances. It means reframing strategic autonomy not as a project to push America away, but as strategic responsibility, the solemn duty of building a European pillar strong enough to defend itself. The era of Europe outsourcing its survival is over. The coming wars will be a time of great danger, but also of great opportunity. It is a test of European unity unlike any seen since World War II. The choice is made now to invest, to integrate, and to finally take responsibility will determine whether Europe forges a shield to protect its future, or becomes a broken, vulnerable pawn in a dangerous new world. The clock is ticking. Is a strong, independent European military the one thing that would finally push Russia to use the very nuclear weapons this new shield is designed to deter? The fuse is lit. What happens next could change everything. Drop your thoughts below, hit like and subscribe for more truth behind the headlines.